You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 222. My name is Clark from 5cardguys.com and 5cardguys on Instagram. Co-hosting with me as usual is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards. John's away for this episode, but he should be back with us next week. Okay, we've got another special guest on the show, and we'll play the interview I had with him in just a bit. His name is Glen, and he operates Suhpreme cards. And he actually reached out to me and asked if we wanted to talk about Star Wars cards with him and how it's been outperforming sports cards in general over the past year. You know, he sent some graphs and data over from Card Ladder, so I was intrigued. Plus, he's got almost 10,000 followers on Whatnot, where he rips Star Wars product regularly. And I think you'll enjoy how he started doing it full-time after working as recently as a VP at Stussy. That's an interesting story. I also took the opportunity to ask him about Star Wars cards in general, and he was helpful in explaining things more in sports cards terms for many of us who are just sports card collectors. So stay tuned for that. But for now, off the top, let's talk about soccer cards, or as the rest of the world calls it, football cards, which I know is confusing because of course we think of the NFL when we hear football. So I'll just stick with soccer cards for this episode. And the reason I bring it up is because I read an article recently on Forbes that talked about why Topps is investing in soccer collectibles. And here's one interesting quote from David Leiner, president of trading cards at Fanatics Collectibles. And he says, quote, "Where we think football or soccer is going on a global basis is it's going to continue to grow and accelerate. And on a collective basis, I think it's going to be big or become the biggest globally in the trading card space." So question for you to start this dialogue. Are we North Americans sleeping on soccer cards, or do you see it steadily growing here?
That's an interesting question because I think us being in the hobby and focused on baseball so much that we forget at how big soccer is worldwide. I think that's the kicker. And I think just to put into perspective, there's about 500 million baseball fans in the world. There are 3.5 billion soccer fans in the world, right? So and then put it into more perspective, I believe, I just looked this up, Star Wars, there's several hundred millions of fans. Pokemon, a couple 100 million fans. So if you look at the industry there of each kind of, respective sport or hobby that I just named, soccer is by far the biggest. But in terms of the hobby, it's the smallest, I would say, right? Or one of the smaller side compared to baseball, at least, right? So I think seeing it from that lens, it makes a ton of sense. How can we capitalize on the marketplace that we don't have presence in? That's all Fanatics is looking at it from, right? The problem is, can you get those fans to become collectors, right? Do you have the strong enough marketing presence to do that? And the answer is yes, right? They definitely have the marketing to be able to do that. So I think there's a huge opportunity in soccer cards because I do believe they have the Bundesliga, they have the UEFA, they have the MLS. So they have the right partnerships in place. And, even with, Messi being, on this side of and maybe that's going to be the catalyst at the end of the day is, still Messi autos command tremendous value. And part of MLS was that it's not UEFA, it's not Bundesliga, it's not, the European football that, is popular. But I think in North America, you're starting to see it a lot more, especially with even I was at St. Louis, which is like a wings place here in Toronto. And right now, soccer is on everywhere, right?
Euro,
the Euro and even the American qualifiers, and Canada's actually, in that and has a chance to kind of move on, which is big for Canadian soccer as well. So I think in general with, the networks picking up more soccer and showing it in North America, I think there's going to be a lot more presence in the next few years. So yeah, I think if you're looking for long term, I think there's a lot of buying opportunities in the right cards that can potentially, lead to that for sure.
Yeah. I'll say one thing though that I've realized, because we live in a diverse city like Toronto, where there's a lot of immigrant populations, a lot of multi-ethnic communities. I feel like sometimes we maybe overestimate how big soccer is, especially during these tournaments like the Euro or World Cup, because, we see it on the news here, at least in these bigger cities. And I'm sure it's the same for bigger cities in the States, right? But there are parts of the country, both in Canada and the US, in North America, where it's not as diverse. So soccer is not going to grow as much in those areas, right? But that being said, I think the growth of the hobby, and this is what we talked about with Mama Breaks, Stephanie Garcia, when she was on the podcast, how most of the growth right now in the hobby is international. It's not growing the kids demographic, which is the future, obviously, but or even the women in the hobby. It's international growth, different countries getting into the hobby. And like you said earlier, other parts of the world, soccer is the number one sport.
Yeah. And
it just seems to me that it's a natural transition to, getting to know more about collectibles with all the marketing that's out there, that the potential is pretty huge if you see it from an international lens. The Netflix shows, that's international. King of collectibles. Other people around the world are going to see that show, and they're going to naturally probably gravitate more towards soccer collectibles or soccer memorabilia because that's their number one sport in their country.
Yeah.
And there was another interesting stat in that article, the Forbes article I mentioned, and it says soccer products accounted for 77% of Topps revenue outside the US.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And the only reason why right now Major League Baseball is their number one revenue generator, because obviously baseball cards has a longer history and most of the hobby money is still in North America. But you can imagine as that share grows outside of the US and Canada, that's going to rebalance itself to more soccer cards, soccer collectibles.
Absolutely. And the only way this could possibly happen would be something called the internet, the ability to communicate.
Yes, exactly.
And now market internationally, globally, where there's no barriers. So you mentioned the small cities here that may not, see soccer as much in their communities, but they're going to see it around more and more based on, what technology is out there in terms of our societal norms, and I think we take it for granted that those are the fundamental aspects that dictate our future, right? So if you see the internet going away, then maybe it won't be able to do that. But I think it's the latter where, technology is going to just increase more our ability to communicate, VR, being able to be across globally, in a different country while not physically being there. I think all this is going to tie into kind of the potential of soccer cards in the future, because like I said, if in a basic marketing, let's just say concepts or fundamental principles, if I have 300 or 3.5 billion people, right? watching soccer. I think it was 3.5. Let me just check that. Yeah, 3.5 billion people. And baseball's 500 million.
Yeah.
If I market to the 3.5 billion as opposed to the 500 million, I'm going to net out more results on that 3.5 billion. Even at a lower conversion rate. That's how marketing works. It's all about the number of niche eyes, or the number of kind of like a specialized eyes you have in whatever you're trying to do. So for me, it's just a matter of, the right marketers, which is Fanatics, and we rave about how great their marketing is. They know what they're doing. They have a really, really good idea of what they're doing from a marketing standpoint. So for me, if it was Topps, old Topps, yeah, I'd be like, I see the potential, but will they be able to execute? I don't think they'll be able to capitalize because their marketing sucks. But Fanatics now taking over Topps, totally different story. And we say it. Mm-hmm. All the big companies in the world, yes, they have their own monetization ways, but all the big companies in the world now are big marketing companies within their niche of whatever they're trying to sell. So for me, that's the way I see it. That's the way I can only see it. So I see a bullish sign in soccer cards. When that happens, who knows? It could take years. It could take, decades. I think it's going to be sooner than later. So I think individually, and this is something, whether you're here to argue this point or not, I think there are opportunities, good buying opportunities that, take advantage 100%. Of it. It's not about being right or wrong. It's all about taking advantage of the knowledge that everybody kind of has, right? So yeah, I'm just based on this conversation, I might be, looking at some soccer cards later today.
You know what? I already have a few on my watch list. I'm so excited about the opportunity, the potential. Lionel Messi on card autos. I don't know if you saw the Topps Chrome MLS where he's playing for Miami.
Yeah.
It looks sick. The mystery redemption. So I'm hoping to get a good deal. We'll see. We'll keep an eye out on that. But just back to your point about technology. We talked about this on Friday, right? Like Courtyard.io and, just the ease of which you can just buy cards and just keep it vaulted. You don't need to get it. Like the biggest problem with, things being popular outside of North America is shipping, the security involved. Even when I see on eBay, there's a seller from Taiwan. I'm like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. You know what I mean? Not to say that, that's shady, but there are other, duties and taxes and all these other things you have to worry about. But now with things being digital, if you wanted to, buy cards for investment purposes, or maybe you want to ship it out to you later in a secure way, now you have that opportunity because of companies like Courtyard or providing vaulting service by Brinks, which is really secure, and PSA and eBay vaults. Like all this is just contributing to a safer kind of environment for collecting and trading. And I think technology is accelerating that. And so if I'm an international buyer or seller, I have more confidence in buying cards or collectibles because I know that things are becoming safer, and so I think that's what's going to also help grow the hobby outside of North America, and tying it all back to soccer cards, which is the predominant sport around the world. You said 3.5 billion. That's crazy. That's half the world. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's half the world. Yeah, so it's like that's on a next level in terms of demographics.
All right, so let's buy some soccer cards after this podcast, and then just hold.
Yeah,
that'll be. I think that's the smart play. All right, let's go now to our interview that we had with Glen Suh of Suhpreme Cards, and hopefully you get to learn more about Star Wars cards. And stay tuned. Right after the interview, we'll do our regular weekly segment. Pick one that I know you guys are a fan of. All right, we got another special guest on the show today, and like I said at the beginning of the pod, his name is Glen Suh, owner of Suhpreme Cards. I get why you spelled Suhpreme that way with an S-U-H, I'll put the link to his Whatnot page in the show notes below. But for those who are into Star Wars cards, you probably heard of Suhpreme Cards, as they have nearly 10,000 followers. Now, Glen reached out to me a couple of weeks ago asking if we talked about non-sports cards on our pod. I said we mostly talk about sports cards, to be honest, but we're always open to learning more about other areas of the hobby. You know, loyal listeners will know that our friend Roy was on the pod to teach us more about Pokemon cards last year. So in the same way, I asked Glen if he'd be interested in coming on to teach us about Star Wars cards, and we're glad he accepted our offer. Plus, I think it helps that Glen also collects and is knowledgeable about sports cards, so he could probably more easily explain Star Wars cards in terms we sports cards collectors understand.
Yeah, I'll tell you in sports cards terms.
Awesome. Yeah. Without further ado, you just heard him. Glen, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me, Clark.
Yeah, so this will be exciting. All right, before the pod, I messaged you asking for a brief bio so I can learn more about your hobby background. And there were a couple of things you mentioned I was really curious about asking you. First, as I just mentioned in your intro, you started off collecting sports cards before you went all in on Star Wars cards. And you also mentioned it started at an early age when your dad worked at Professional Coin Grading Service, or PCGS for short, which is actually a sister company to PSA. So it looks like you had some access to raw cards and graded slabs even back then as a child. So I'm wondering if we could start our conversation there. Like, what do you remember about collecting cards back then? And did you keep collecting until now, or did you take a break like many of us did and then return to the hobby later in life?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, my dad working at PCGS, naturally, you know, he was pretty much shown this world, right, of grading service. And that's where he learned about cards. He's a huge basketball fan, so he was collecting Michael Jordan, stuff like that. So he would get cards slabbed and he'd bring them home for me. And I'd be like, what are these? And he explained it to me, right? Like the value is higher and condition and mint. So at that early age, I got really exposed to slabs early. So I already knew what they were. I started collecting them with my dad. I was into Pokemon when I was younger as well. Obviously, all of us were really collecting Pokemon cards. I'd say I stopped probably around 14, around there. So I didn't stop as early as most people did. I still kind of continued because of my family, right? My dad's ties to it. So after that, I stopped for a bit. And then really, I'd say in 2019, a little bit before that whole like Whatnot and all that, like sports cards went crazy. It was a little bit before that I actually was already getting back into the hobby. Okay. So it was funny because I saw the wave of all these people coming in all of a sudden. I was like, wait, what happened to the price of wax? Like it was not that much. And then and ever since then, I've just been collecting steadily. And it's like I said, it started with sports. I still do a lot of sports. I still collect a lot of sports. Okay. I'm just a lot pickier now, and I don't really do breaks as much. I'm more so buying what I want. And then I'm collecting more Star Wars now just because of the market, and it makes more sense right now. Okay. Yeah, no, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into what you just mentioned about the Star Wars cards market. But before you kind of mentioned that, you know, when you were collecting sports cards as a child, and your dad brought back any big cards that you had, or? No, and that's what I always make fun of him for, right? As I always tell him, like, you had access when it was a much smaller company. Like, he was sitting down with the graders at lunch, right? I remember we would go to their company parties, and they were just like picnics out in their lot because they were so small, right? So like, it was just crazy because I'm willing to bet at that time if you're like buddy with somebody, like, hey, give me a good grade. It's such a small company at the time. Yeah, right. But it was just funny because I was like, you could have got all of them to tell you what to grade, what's gonna appreciate. But he just didn't have any interest in that stuff. He collected like stamps and coins and stuff like that, and he liked basketball, and he had cards that he graded, but it wasn't the level that we're at today. You know, with most of us in the hobby. Sure. Yeah, that's so funny. But nothing big though. I always look back. I'm like, wow, what else do you have? And he shows me like Michael Jordan stuff, but they're just like normal upper deck, like common cards that he just draw graded. Right. Yeah. And only if you had that like 85 flair or. I'm like, Dad, you couldn't just grab like a Kobe Bryant, like just cause, it's probably so cheap that rookie year too back then. Yeah. But yeah, it was just not even a thought for him. Okay, that's funny. And you also mentioned you came back around 2019. Was there anything in particular that made you want to come back into the hobby at that time? So yeah, it was because I actually found all my Pokemon cards. I was moving, and I found all of them, and I found the slabs and all that, and I was like, what are these worth? And you start going on eBay, right? And then I was like, what do they look like now? And then it's like, oh, you learn through threads and Reddit, like, oh, there's Whatnot, there's apps and stuff like that. So I was at the very, very, like, before Whatnot got released, I was like, what is this? Because I was breaking on IG, like buying from people. And then when Whatnot came out, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. They like systemize all of it. It's all logistically organized. I'm like, this is awesome. This might go somewhere. And I think that's what really helped with the hobby, though, right? It's because people were doing on IG. Even for me, if I spent X amount of money, after a certain point, I'm like, am I going to get these cards? Like, I'm going to get these cards, right? He's going to make sure he sends me the right cards, right? Like, there's all that worry. I think that's what really made people hesitate buying online through a stream. And then once that happened, it really helped, just streamline everything.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, for sure. I would agree with you 100%. Okay, now tell us when you went from collecting sports cards more exclusively to going all in on Star Wars cards. When did that happen?
Yeah, so it all started with me being on a Whatnot stream, one of the bigger sports streams, and I'd be watching all the time, buying into the sports breaks. And then when there was release date for Star Wars, a couple of the breakers are super into Star Wars. They'd be like, oh, we're going to rip, release date, Galaxy, Masterwork, which are like the creme de la creme. And it made sense for that room because it was a premium room. So I just got exposed to the premium Star Wars product right away. I wasn't a Star Wars guy like that. That's the crazy part. I watched the movies, but I was just like anybody else who was like, I got to go watch Avatar. I got to go watch, all the big movies in theater, right? Star Wars was one of them. But I wasn't by any means like a Star Wars head. And I saw these cards and I was like, wait, what? Star Wars has cards? And then they're like, yeah, they're probably the most beautiful, but they're slept on because people don't know about them. And when I saw these cards, I fell in love. I was like, wait, there's sketches. I'm an art freak. I've studied art my whole life. I come from streetwear, so I appreciate art a lot. So when I saw the design aspect of Star Wars cards, it's not a template, right? Where with sports cards, you see a template. It's like a different position, or it's like a splash or some type of insert, right? It's just a different picture. With Star Wars, you don't have that. Everything is a different scene. All 100 cards in a set are different scenes. So like, for example, I have some cards here. You'll see like this card here. This one here. Is like completely different from this one here. There's no template, right? There's no they don't look the same. They just swapped out Vader with our C-3PO. So that aspect of it, I really, really liked. And that's what caught my attention. And then when I found out there were sketches, look at these. Like when I found out there were sketches, these are sketches.
That's crazy.
It's a one of one that someone drew, right? Like they use oil, they use whatever medium they want. It just intrigued me. And I was like, this is beautiful.
That's crazy. And those sketches, those cards come out of the packs.
Correct. Yep.
Wow.
They're case hits, right? So there's like one per case, and it might be a outline black and white sketch. It could be worth $75, $100, but then you have masterpieces like something like this that could come out that goes for $2 to $4K, right? And this is Angel Avias. He's one of the best sketch artists for tops in general. He does it for all of their like baseball. But you get something like this, it sells for like $2 to $4K, right? So It's absolutely crazy the value that there is in Star Wars. And that's really why I transitioned. It got to a point where I was selling sports slabs, but then I was like, I can never sell wax because I felt like there wasn't value for my customers. It's like, I'm selling you this knowing you're going to tank, right? Unless you get the lottery. So for me, I understand sports. And that's why when you said that, I was like, exactly. I can tell you in sports terms, when you buy a box of Prism, right, or Select, basketball, football, let's be real. You're buying that for $1,000, $1,200. You're getting back maybe 100 to 150 cards that you actually would want to even post and sell. You could dollar out every single card, sure, but no one does that, right? So then realistically, you get a big case hit even sometimes. Like Obsidian, I was chasing, I got a Hertz Color Blast. I had to buy 3 boxes of it. I could have just bought the Color Blast, right? It doesn't make sense. With Star Wars, it's not like that. The price point is so much lower that you're talking about $150 to $250 boxes, but you can pull $24,000 cards out of them. You can pull like the ceiling's not as high, but the entry and just to be able to get in and be able to hit, there's so many things in between that too, right? That you can pull. But the crazy part about Star Wars is grading. So when a lot of my friends see me ripping through cases of Star Wars and they do sports, they're like, are you crazy? I'm like, oh, I'm going to get my money back. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm going to grade every single one of these cards and they're going to sell for a profit. And then I'm going to get to keep all my hits and I'm going to be able to pay for that box for free. That's how I have all these nukes right here. I have like really 2 suitcases. People ask me, do you buy all these? I'm like, yeah, no, I bought the cases and I ripped it, but then I graded. And that's the hardest part, I have to admit, right? It's not that easy. You have to have the money to grade up front to get the money back, which is tough, right? If you're grading thousands of cards. But if you do that, you actually can get your money back. And I know a lot of my friends, they try to counter me and they go, well, then you got to get all 9s and 10s. And I go, well, that's the crazy part. Star Wars QA on the product is so crazy. You have to like try to get an 8. Like you have to try to submit an 8. Like it's hard. Most of them come out 10s, and honestly, and some of them come out 9s, but you normally end up winning. And I think with Star Wars, it's interesting because I think you have not as much awareness of the product, and you also probably have more kids ripping it, you know, as a percentage of market share compared to like the total, that the kids don't have money to grade. So when you do grade a card, you see cards in a 10. You know how in sports they go 3x? That's a lie. It goes to 2.5, 3x for maybe a premium player, right? Like a Burrow or Brady. But in Star Wars, people are selling gem 10s for 8x, 6x of raw.
Crazy.
Because people aren't grading them and they don't have money, and some people just don't do it. So then if you do have that money, you have that advantage of being able to grade. And then people are like, well, there's not a lot of options. There's not a bunch of Vaders being graded, right? So it's a lot easier to sell. It's more liquid. That's kind of why I changed. And I was like, this is crazy. I was able to offload Star Wars so quickly. And then I went to shows and people were asking, what are these cards? People didn't even like cards or didn't even like anything. They just like Star Wars. Like, this is cool. Do you have that in a Padme? Do you have that in a Yoda or Grogu? And I was like, sure. And what they were willing to pay for it was like, it assured me that there's a market for this. Like people see the value that I'm seeing and they see the beautiful work and the designs and they're seeing the value. And like more than ever, I am seeing sports cards people in my streams. And that's the reason why I reached out to you, because I don't think people know, right? And they don't, because I talk to these customers. My running joke in my stream is, a year ago when I started, we had no sports guys. So every time there was a big game on, I could go on and stream it. All the Star Wars guys were on their buying because they don't even care about the sports, right? But I can't get an update on the sports because I care and I'm streaming, so I can't watch it. And then now, you 40 year later, I have guys in there live updating me on every sport. There's so many sports guys I've crossed over because they're just like, I can't keep paying for a $1,200 Prism and getting $150 back. So they're like, I like Star Wars, I like collecting. And so they're pivoting. And so like I asked them, why are you here? Like, how did you find Star Wars? And it's exactly what I just said. They're always saying I got priced out. It didn't make sense. And I just felt like this was better.
That's so interesting. Yeah, no, right after this pod, I'm going to start looking up Star Wars cards, see what's out there. And I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's crazy because when you say that, like, you know, I just looked up the cards I bought last year. I collect Vader. So I bought a lot of his big low number cards from premium sets. Dude, when I bought them, I was like, this is so cheap for how low, like the low pop is out of 25 PSA 10. I bought that Vader for about $200. I looked the price today. It's less than a year on my eBay that I bought it for that. It's $600 today.
Wow. Crazy.
It's absolutely insane. And it's been like this for almost all my cards. I just haven't lost it. And so that's why for me, I was like, I need to bring the awareness, because I think there's a lot of Star Wars fans. I think they just don't know it's an option, or they just think, are those even worth anything? Or like, do people even collect them? But a lot of people do, and they're starting to if they didn't before. Yeah,
no, that's so interesting. And you kind of answered my next question already, because it's obvious to me now, or more obvious to me anyway, but the success you're having with flipping Star Wars cards and collecting Star Wars cards. And you mentioned in the brief bio you sent me, and I love hearing this part of the story because it speaks to your passion for the hobby. But you were a VP for Stussy, the popular clothing retailer, and you left that job to pursue, doing what you do now. So
I left clothing in general just because I was like, I love what I do. I love streetwear. I'm a huge clothing guy and I love art. So it's perfect for me. But I've always wanted to own my own business. And you got to understand, I was buying cards like avidly in 2020. So I never thought this would even come to fruition. It's just weird how it happened. I started streaming while I had a full-time job being a VP, and people would be like, why are you streaming? And I'm like, because I like it. It's fun. Like, I like the community, meeting people. And I just kind of got addicted to it. So I started doing it, and I started sleeping like 4 hours a day, running this full-time job while streaming every minute I could. And it just kind of turned into this. And now we're here. And I fully quit. And I was like, I have to commit to this because I think this is like my calling. This is what I want to do. I don't think it's work. And Clark, if you would have asked me a year ago, what do you think about that saying that if you do what you love every day, you won't work a day in your life? I would have told you bullshit. If there's a job that you want to do, like I love playing music, I love, collecting cards. It's like, can I make money from it though? Usually you can't, right? So I always tell people that's a dream, right? But now it's crazy. Fast forward a year where it's like, I never would have thought that. And I'm just like, yeah, I love what I do, and I don't think it's work every day. I feel blessed every day to be able to get up and run a stream and look at cards and rip them for people, like, and collect them and grade them. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, that's an amazing story to hear, and I'm glad you found that. And the same for me. Like, I kind of do this hobby content creation on a full-time basis, and you would have asked me 4 years ago if this was possible, and
you never would have imagined, right?
And I love how our stories are similar, because it was a side hustle, to start off with. I had a full-time job as well, and then you kind of transition. But that's why I love hearing that. And
when did you do that? When did you transition?
It was probably about 2 years ago when I fully went from, like, I was a journalist for most of my career, and then the newspaper industry was slowly dying. We all know this. And then I became a digital marketer for a friend's company. And then when the pandemic hit, things really slowed down for that company too. And so it's kind of a blessing in disguise. Honestly,
for a reason, I believe that.
Yeah. So when he let me go, like, I wasn't upset at all. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Now I don't have an excuse not to do it full time.
That's when you know you love what you're doing, though, and you're in the right place. Because that's how I felt. For the first time I was a job, I felt like safe. I felt like I knew what I was doing and I had a purpose. It wasn't uncertainty. There wasn't any, even though I should have been, because I didn't know, where this is really going to go. But I just knew I loved what I was doing and that passion. I knew that if I kept doing it, it could potentially go somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. The rest of my questions are more specific about not sports cards, but Star Wars cards. And remember, many of our listeners aren't as familiar, if at all, about collecting Star Wars. So where do you think would be a good place to start? If someone came up to you and said, hey Glenn, I'm interested in Star Wars cards, which ones might be cool to start collecting? Where would you lead them first?
I mean, first I would say, in terms of what you collect, I'd say collect what you like, right? Because if you collect what you like, you can never go wrong. Right. I mean, and I'd say secondly, just try to stick to more premium product for Star Wars. Usually I'd say the starting is like Finest. It's called Finest. And then I'd say Chrome Black, entry level. And then higher premium tier is Galaxy, which is the hobby. It's like the Prism of basketball. It's like what everyone collects. If you get the super fractor from there, it's going to go for the most. And then also Masterwork. That's like it's a thick card. So it's like that. It's like their NT. Flawless.
Okay.
That one's just more expensive, all on card autos. So you have autographs too from like all the actors, like Giancarlo Esposito, right? Like he's in there. You have all the actors signed. So I'd definitely say start there, but premium products appreciate more. So me personally, a lot of my customers come in and ask, why do you not carry like the cheaper stuff? I just tell them, listen, my stream, I run it where I will never sell you something I would never collect or buy. Right. That's just simply the way I would do it, because I know that I'm going to sell you a product that's going to appreciate and that I know that it's going to bring value. I refuse to sell things that are profitable but not going to help the customer. I don't want to sell stuff like that to my customers.
Yeah, I can respect that for sure. I have my 5 Card Guys Instagram handle, which is where I have most of my followers, and similar. I started posting only high-end cards, like nothing under 1,000. And every once in a while, I get like, hey, can you post cards that I can actually afford? It's just more fun to collect more higher end. And I know it's not for everyone, but at the same time.
But that is also the one that everyone marvels at, right? Those are the ones people want to see. Like, I think that's what people
exactly.
It's not like we're trying to be pompous. It's just that if I post a regular common Vader card, nobody cares about it because everyone has it, right? You want to post a big one and everyone's like, wow, that's super cool, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's what you want to share with the world, those things that people don't get to see very often.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Masterwork and Galaxy. So those are the higher end, more premium sets. In terms of, I know with sports cards, premium sets are the prices are out of control. But can you give us kind of a little bit of context? How much would a box cost of Galaxy or Masterwork?
So I'm going to give you box prices. So there's 21, 22, and 23 Galaxy so far. Those are the modern Star Wars Chrome sets. So they're the first cards that are not on paper. They're actually like the Chrome. So 21 was borderless. It was the first premium Star Wars set that was modern. So that one right now, when it released, it was $150. It's $1,000 today. $1,100 to $1,200 is probably what you pay if you can find one. And then 22 is slowly becoming that, where it's getting phased out. It's very hard to find it, but a box is going to run you anywhere from $350 to $450, maybe even $500, depending on if it's from a fresh case. It matters a lot in Star Wars. And then I would say the newest one, the latest 23 Galaxy. So that was probably about $150 about a month ago. It's now sitting at about $300.
Wow. All
so
right.
Everything's just flying up. And we didn't have this before in Star Wars, right? Before in Star Wars, I sell this stuff last year and it was like, it'd move up maybe halfway through the year, right? But now it's like it moves on a weekly. It goes up.
It's crazy. Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. And you kind of just mentioned very briefly in passing, it matters when it comes out of a fresh case. Is there a particular reason why?
So the reason why is because when you have a fresh case, it means that you have multiple case hits lives and potential hits in there that you can hit. So you have sketch 1 of ones that are guaranteed at least one every case. But then every 5 cases, you have things like a kyber crystal. It's like a crystal shaped, and then it has like a character on it, and they're like 1 in every 5 cases. Dual autos, which are even rare. It's like, I think it's like 25 or 50 cases or something like that. There's 1 auto. So there's just all these different hits. So you have the best shot when it's a fresh case, obviously, just like anything else, really. But I'd say in Star Wars, there's so many more case hit possibilities than in sports that it really does matter. Because if you're picking from a case of a fresh 12, yet you're buying with every possibility of X Fractor and all the other things you can hit. But then if you're buying it from, like, people always buy online, right? From DA Car World and stuff like that. And I get you can do that. It's cheaper. But whether they're shipping you 2 boxes, you don't know if that came out from the last 2 and maybe all 10 were already shipped out with the case hits and you just had no shot, right? Which is why people come to me all the time and they go, why am I buying and paying more here, right? I'm like, well, first of all, I can charge a fee, right, from the platform. But second of all, it's a live pack out, right? You get to see what's coming out. If you see the big hit taken out, you don't have to bid as much because you know that it's not there, right? So that's the advantage. It's just a different game you're playing.
Gotcha. That's super helpful as well. All right. I kind of wanted to go a little bit back in time now. Do you collect like the vintage Star Wars?
So I have some. It's super expensive to go with super vintage, so they're not graded. They're just raw cards that I collect. But yeah, I don't know if you've seen like the famous Luke Skywalker that Aoki has. Like a PSA 10, that's a $40,000 card. It's so hard to find those cards in 1977. So if they're even around, and you can find someone who's willing to sell it. So yeah, it's pretty much impossible to find or collect any good condition of those cards, I guess.
So it's similar to like the vintage baseball cards.
It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. It's like you're not going to find it if you do. Someone's keeping it. There's no reason to sell it. They're going to try grading it, Right. And especially those cards, I guess the condition really matters more. It does. So even more so on those paper ones. Yeah. And not only that, you got to remember technology back then was so much worse. So the alignment's terrible. Like if you look at cards before like 1980, they're just like, they could be completely off to the left and the other one's like a little bit to the right. And you're just like, what is going on?
Well, sports cards collectors will know that. That's a familiar story.
Very familiar with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that much about Star Wars because you see those big Luke Skywalker 1977 top sales where they're going for tens of thousands of dollars. So is Topps the only one that manufactures Star Wars cards? They have the only
ones that has a licensing to it. Yeah, the licensing rights, correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's another question I want to ask you now. We kind of already talked about the more modern Star Wars cards, and I feel like there's a lot of different sets out there, right? You're just how do you keep track of all of them, or is it just like once you get into it, you just start to learn?
Once you get into it, it's just like sports, right? Like when I first got into sports, I was like, Select, Prism, Absolute, like what is all this, right? And then you kind of understand there's like an order and hierarchy for depending on what each person and what's your buy, right? Like what can you actually afford to collect with? So it's kind of the same way with Star Wars. There's just different levels, and actually it's funny because if you really just think about it, you look at the product names, they're actually products that you have in sports. Like, so a lot of the baseball, they have Chrome Black, they have Finest, they have, it's very similar. They have Chrome. It's the same thing. It's just Star Wars. Yeah.
No, that's it'll make the transition that much easier then.
Yeah.
All right. You also talked about this already too. I've seen autograph cards in some sets of the actors that play the different Star Wars characters. I don't know if this is a dumb question, but like sports cards, are there different kinds of autos, like sticker autos and on-card autos?
No, dude, it's exactly the same as sports. The sticker, they're obviously not as valuable as on-card.
Okay, it's the same.
And then also you have different value for people, right? It's by its popularity sometimes, but sometimes because really for us, there's no measuring benchmark of performance, right, for Star Wars,
right?
Which I want to also get into and touch on. But because of that, I think that's also the main reason why, this all makes sense with Star Wars too, is because you have popularity gauge. For example, Padme, she's Natalie Portman. Like you have guys that drool over her, and then you have women that want to be like her, right? And then you just have Star Wars fans that are like, she's cool. She's my character.
Yeah.
So Padme autos, like they're insane. They go from minimum, the cheapest one you'll probably find is like 2,500. But there's one I just acquired recently. It was an out of 5. It was first on the print. It was 7K, right? So like there's cards like that. And then there's like a Vader auto, right? Some guy just bought a $18 pack in my pack out, and then he ended up hitting it. We graded it for him. He got a 10 on it. The card's probably worth 12 grand, and he paid like $18 for the pack.
Nice.
Right. So there's like a lot of crazy big cards. It's just, it depends on who's signing. James Earl Jones, Carrie Fisher, Carrie Fisher passed away. So someone we just pulled a Superfractor for auto from Chrome Black. It's probably a 15 to 20K card because it's probably one of the last autos she signed. Right. So there's a lot of cool things that you can collect, even if you're not into Star Wars, but you just like these actors or actresses.
Sure.
There's a lot of cool things you can collect there, even with autos.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And you kind of mentioned at the beginning, when you started getting into Star Wars, you weren't like a huge Star Wars fan, right? And that's like me. I watched all the movies, but I don't have any like action figures. I never had any of those things.
No, I don't have any clothes. I don't have any like gear that says Star Wars. I don't have any watches or anything, right? So it's like I got into it. I still really don't have all that stuff, but I got into it and started watching and rewatched all the movies, and then went crazy deep into all the shows and rewatched them because this is like what I do now. And this is what I like. But it's funny because the cards got me into Star Wars. It wasn't like I was into Star Wars and I got into cards. It was kind of weird, but it worked out.
That's that's me in basketball. I wasn't really into basketball until I started collecting basketball cards.
And all the rookies, the bench players, all the prospects, and before you're just like, who's this guy?
This true story. I'm like, Luka Doncic, who's this guy? Like everyone wants his card, and you're like, it's thousands of dollars, and then I realize he's a generational player, and I was rooting hard for the Mavs this NBA Finals because
I like Irving, man. I like him. And I really I think Luka's so good that he should win. I think the fact that they even go as far as they do with the talent they have on the team is crazy. It's Luka and Irving,
Yeah, for sure. I for selfish reasons, I have a Luka Doncic rookie auto, so I was really
okay. So you're hoping that goes to the moon.
But they'll have another shot in future seasons, hopefully. You also mentioned parallels. Things are numbered to 5. Is it similar to sports cards, like in terms of the coloring, like a red is a 5?
The same parallel colors as like the baseball, like out of 5 red, Superfractor like gold, right? They do stray away randomly on certain things, but it's very, very similar. Yeah.
Okay. I thought it would be a more steep learning curve, but I feel like
that's what you find. Though I think that's why it was so easy for me, right, to go into that not knowing a whole lot about the cards, because that was just once you see, you're like, oh, I see what's happening here. They're just copying the format, but with Star Wars.
No, it's pretty genius, actually. All right, so what do you think the future holds for Star Wars cards? You just made this big transition, really going into a more full time. We talked about parallels. You think we talked about this on our previous podcast episodes about sports cards, where we talked about whether they're printing too many parallels, or are they starting to overproduce now because it is getting a little bit more popular? Do you think there are similar concerns for Star Wars or not?
It actually happened in 23 Galaxy, the recent one. They added an extra parallel, an Aqua at a 199. The highest parallel before that used to be at a 150. So now it dilutes, there's more Vaders, right? There's more Ahsokas because you have to make them for all those extra parallels. So there is a concern that I guess, but I really think that I don't see it getting that out of control where it's going to go super high into crazy numbers. I think that's probably where it'll stay. Maybe it'll go into I don't see it going to 200s. I really don't. But I mean, I think for the state of the hobby itself, though, I knew if I did this full time, it would be good just because looking at data. So, me being a VP before, all we do is look at data, right? You look at data to make decisions. And so for me, I looked at analytics. And so there's Pancake Analytics does forecasting for like the sports card or in general for cards market. And they just released a report and you could see it. And it was very in line with what I'm seeing on the app as well. You see football, basketball is down. You see baseball up slightly a little bit. And then the only category in Marvel is down, Pokemon is down, TCG and general Magic. And then you see this huge blip up and it's the only one, it's Star Wars. And then if you have card ladder, right, and that's what I use. If you go to the
Yep.
categories and you can use like a stock, and you go to the last 2 years and you can see the drop offs, everything is going down, down, down. The only category of all 50 some categories is Star Wars is up 22% in the last 2 years. And like I said, it's proof, right? I bought all this stuff last year. I'm looking at the prices now. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is what they're going for now? Like, it's absolutely insane. And I just don't see it stopping. I think as the awareness happens, when I told you earlier, I want to touch on performance. The reason why I think there's so much stability here is because Vader from 21, every year it goes up. When I try to collect and finish my sets, every year I wait, I have to pay more. It keeps going up. And it's because you're not benchmarking off of performance, right? If Kyrie Irving retires early, gets hurt, doesn't perform, his value goes down. Vader doesn't have a performance benchmark, right? He doesn't go down. And you know that he's not going to murder anyone, rape anyone. There's none of that's going to happen to create, like, he's not going to pull a gun out on IG Live, right? They don't have to worry about that. So it's just more stable and it's just constantly up. And yeah, it doesn't go like this. He's not going to go up overnight with a huge performance of any sort, but it's very stable and it just keeps going up. I see it as a blue chip stock, essentially.
Yeah. Nice. Kind of a question, a follow-up question. I get the with sports cards, you got to worry about all those factors you just mentioned. But if you compare Star Wars with like other TCG games, obviously those characters, you don't have to worry about their shady background or what they do in the future. Why do you think Star Wars is kind of separating from like Pokemon and other TCG cards?
I mean, I think it's because it's so ingrained in the culture and pop culture in general, right? And when you think of iconic movies, you think about just characters that are made up in a fictional world. It's probably one of the biggest globally, right? And they've done the marketing, like they have poster cards that you can pull and as inserts where it's like in Spanish, and there's one in Japanese and one in Korean. Like there's just so many different. It's been around for so long and it's been in pop culture influence around the world that I just think that I don't see it going down, and that's the edge it has over everything else. And then it's just the awareness, which is why I'm here, right? It's like I feel like people just need to know that they exist, and once they see them, they're not going back to sports. I'll tell you that right now. Like they might continue to dabble, but I don't think they're going to go ham into sports again. I think they're going to get smarter and be like, this makes more sense. I like sports. I like Star Wars. Sports, it's hard to get my money back if I open wax. Star Wars, I can, and it makes sense, So I think that's what's happening right now.
Okay. No, that's Oh man, I'm kind of getting excited. Like I love learning new things, and when there's an opportunity, I can't wait to check out some Star Wars cards for sure. I'm sure I have there's a lot of other questions about Star Wars. Is there anything else we should know about Star Wars that I haven't asked so far? What do you think?
I would say just in general, the community is just different. Even like the people involved, I mean, the signers and all the actors and actresses, you'd be surprised. I tag them and I put that, when there's an auto, and they always like the comment or respond. They go, that's a cool card. Thanks for tagging me. And I think because they are all like that as a community, and the Star Wars actors and like all the actresses, I think it really kind of trickles down and rubs off on the collectors as well. The community is just different. Everyone cares about each other. I've never seen in a room where someone pulls a car that's like $100 and it's like, damn, I need to buy that for my rainbow. It's like the last car I need, and people are just like, have it. And it's like, I don't really see that in sports as often.
That's cool.
But I see it in Star Wars all day, all the time, where people are like, hey, I need that card. Can I get it? And someone's like, dude, take it. Or DM me, we can trade for something. But everyone's so about the community and trying to help people collect their rainbows. And I think it's just, there's a lot less snakiness and trying to flip and sell. I think there's just more true collectors. So you have this community that's just not like any other community I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, no, that's cool to hear for sure. Well, speaking of the Star Wars card collecting community, can you describe like what they're like? When I talk to my wife about sports cards, there's this like stereotype image that she has, like, oh, they're all nerds from baseball. No, Star Wars, I'm sure we'll get more of that in some ways.
No, 100%. And you're not wrong, right? So like, even I wouldn't say nerds. I mean, that's like one way you could put it. I'd say people that are just more introverted and like to spend more time indoors. Right. I definitely feel like it's people that are not into sports and other things, and they fell into this category where they like a tight-knit community. I think people that you find more likely on Reddit and other like online forums. And so it's interesting though, because I can't say nerd, because that's the funny part is I meet up with some of these guys thinking that in the beginning, like, oh, they're probably going to be nerdier guys. Am I going to get along with them? There's so many guys that are they're very normal. It's funny because you get this thought and you think they're going to be like glasses. I work at NASA, right? Like, no, it's not even like that. They're just normal dudes. Yeah. And so it's really interesting because I definitely thought that. And I would say there's probably more of that than in sports, right? People that are spending time indoors and people that are as active with sports and don't care about sports. But I definitely see you have tons of guys, just like I said, from the sports community coming over.
Right.
So it's when I go to these things and I expect a certain type of person, and it's just not. It's a totally different person I expected. You know?
Yeah. No, that's hilarious. That's
but you're not wrong. We get that all the time. Like even when I say like to my friends, like, "Oh, you quit your job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to be selling like Star Wars cards." They're like, "Nerd," you know. Like I get it. I totally get it. And like we don't even take offense to it. Like in the community, people will literally be like, "We're nerds." Like you know, it is. We own it in a sense. It's just like we don't really believe that, but it is what it is, and we'll play along with it. You know.
No, you know what? I could totally empathize. Like we get that from the collecting sports cards. It's kind of same thing, but
same thing. You're the guy that collects a card, doesn't play the sport, right? It's like that's like the whole thing. They think it's like a nerd collecting thing, you know. And it's like we're just normal people.
Or they'll think I said sports cars, and that's kind of cool. And I'm like, no, it's cards, sports cards, those cardboard pieces.
I've had to backpedal before on someone and be like, "Oh yeah, sports cards," and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool. How fast do those cards go?" I'm like, "No, it's cards, not cards."
Not cards. We've had same stories, I'm sure, with other collectors. Well, Glen, appreciate the time you gave me to just learn about sports, Star Wars, and I'd like to always end the interview with some rapid fire questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I'd like to ask this one first for like sports card collectors. So I'll ask you for as a Star Wars card collector, what's your favorite PC Star Wars card that you have right now?
It's got to be the Star Wars Saga. It's Superfractor 101 that I pulled, and I have the full rainbow now graded, but it would be this card here. It's basically all the OGs from Star Wars on it, and it's the 101, and I got it in the PSA 10 when I graded it.
Amazing. Yeah, I love it. I love the artwork on that too. Any Grail Star Wars cards you're currently chasing?
Yeah, I'm always chasing Superfractors or 101s of any type of Mandalorian. Ahsoka, I want to say Vader, but he's just so expensive that there's just so many Vader collectors. So I'd probably say Ahsoka and Mandalorian.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Can you name a couple of Star Wars cards you think are just really underrated right now?
Yeah, I think the set called Celebration is very underrated. It's a top set that is actually created for a Star Wars convention that happens every 2 years at a different part of the world. Okay. So like last year, it was in Europe. So it was Celebration Europe, and all the artists that sketched for the cards were all European artists. And then in 2025, I'm going to Japan for it, and it's going to probably be Japanese artists. So cool. I think that's the most slept on set. Yeah.
Okay. So the Celebration, they're all like sketch cards?
They're sketch cards that artists sketched, and then they print those and make those the actual cards. Gotcha. And then the actual artist proof, like the one that they drew it on and submitted, it's a chase as a sketch live in the product. And those go $1,000 potentially. Yeah,
that's cool. That's cool. You kind of already answered this in our initial interview, but what would you say is the most bullish reason you have to think Star Wars cards have a bright future?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's really because of the uniqueness of the product and how unique every scene is and every card is. And then also just mixed with the fact that the awareness is so low, right? So there's only upside. I feel like there's like only more people are going to know about it because not a lot of people know about it right now.
Yep. Cool. And last question we like to do for the rapid fire section is a little bit more Canadian centric because we're based out of Toronto, Canada. Okay. So I had to think, I'm like, how do I make this Canadian centric? So there's a Canadian actor who played Anakin Skywalker, who later turns into Darth Vader, of course, and his name is Hayden Christensen. So what are his cards worth? Are they worth collecting?
Yes. So if you're talking Anakin himself as a character, yes, of course. And then if you're talking about the auto, Hayden Christensen himself, that is probably one of the top 3-4 autos.
No way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, other than like your Hamill and Fischlers, which are like, that's very few of them out there. Yeah. I mean, you're really talking about Ahsoka and then Christian Hayden, who plays Vader. Definitely the tops. Yeah.
Okay. 100%. Yeah, there you go. Shout out to fellow Canadian actor Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, shout out to Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, awesome. Glenn, once again, thank you for your time. We appreciate your insight and your knowledge about Star Wars cards, and hope to connect, in the future. And if I see a cool card, I'm going to DM you. It's like, hey, how's this card?
If you got any questions about Star Wars or anything, you definitely come my way, Clark. I'll help you out.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And Suhpreme Cards is where you can find Glenn streaming on Whatnot. Again, I'll put that in the show notes below where you can find him. So thanks again. I want to talk to you.
Clark, thank you so much for the time, man. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, we just want to thank Glenn again for the interview, for coming on to the pod and teaching us about Star Wars cards. I definitely learned a lot more, and hopefully we'll be able to keep in touch with him in the future. All right, let's finish off this show with our regular weekly segment we call Pick One. And if you haven't heard this segment before, this is when Hyung and I, we just choose 2 or more cards in this case, because I got 3 for today. And we debate which one we would rather invest in. So, Hyung, do you want to start things off for us?
Sure. Let's, right now, Aaron Judge is insane.
Yep.
His numbers we're almost exactly at the halfway mark. So back in 2022, when he hit 62, he was obviously the unanimous MVP of the season. Mm-hmm. And, he had about 700 plate appearances, in 2022. He's at about 350 right now. And if you extrapolate the data, it's exactly half. And in terms of the production, he's on pace for that same year in 2022, which is insane because he had such a slow start to this year. He was struggling at I think in May where, he was really struggling and wasn't catching his stride. And now it's just, he's unstoppable.
Video game numbers, yeah.
Video game numbers. And the crazy thing is, he's doing something special. I think there's a massive Aaron Judge buying opportunity. I know you've sold, and did well with Aaron Judge at the end of the day. And it's tough for you to buy back in. But I think it's to a point where there's kind of like, I would say, Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, and Juan Soto, maybe. Those are the kind of like the 3 kind of like blue chip stocks, right? And I still think because Aaron Judge had that kind of crash with the whole market, whereas Ohtani kind of took off still, I think there is a buying opportunity. And I'm going to actually pair it up with his teammate Juan Soto because, and before you pick, because I know we're going to both pick Aaron Judge. Okay. But before we pick, I want to just put it out there and before anybody decides, because the reason why I keep Juan Soto's name still in the mix is because Juan Soto is 25 years old. And Aaron Judge is 32 years old. Yeah. Aaron Judge, right now, he's at about a 47 WAR. And Juan Soto is at a 33 WAR. Which is insane. Like, that just shows you at how good Juan Soto is. Aaron Judge is doing Aaron Judge things, which makes sense. So I think there's a lot of hype with him right now. But I just want, before we pick Aaron Judge in our pick one, I just want to lay out that Juan Soto is equally as impressive. And don't let just the home run numbers dictate that. We're talking, look at him, 25 years old. He has a World Series ring. He has an MVP, he has a batting title, and he's 25 years old. And he's on trajectory to be a 100+ WAR candidate. Whether Judge will get there, that's to be determined. I personally think Judge won't get there. So I'm throwing that disclaimer out there. So with that said, we have $2,500 to play with. Okay. We got a 2013 Bowman Chrome, Aaron Judge, BGS 9.5 with 2 sub-10 subgrades, auto 10, refractor, auto. I don't think it's numbered. We talked about this. Yep. $2,500 last sold. Yep. And I'm going to pair that up with 2016 Juan Soto Bowman Chrome auto refractor, numbered to $499. PSA 9. sold for $2,500. What's the better $2,500 investment? Because, and just throwing it out there, that Soto might be a good candidate to crack it and submit it to BGS for 9.5.
Right. Good point.
Right. So I would say apples to apples in terms of the grade. It could be the same grade, but obviously BGS 9.5 should fetch a little more. So what are you doing with $2,500? Are you going with the Soto or the Judge? That's why I had to put the disclaimer, because I knew you were going to just pick Judge right off the bat.
Yeah. Now I don't know what I was chosen if you didn't choose the disclaimer, because you put you gave a lot of context. So right now with everything you mentioned, I think it's easy for me. I will go for Soto.
Interesting.
With all that you said, because first, I think there's value in PSA 9 cards now. I think it's been so devalued. We talked about it in a previous pod way before, where PSA 9s are almost going as for the price of the raw cards,
Right.
But I think there's an opportunity with PSA 9s now. So that's one thing. I did think about the Juan Soto and Aaron Judge age difference. That was another thing before you even mentioned it. And with Aaron Judge, he's still, I don't know if this is fair or not. You can tell me what you think, but I still think he's injury prone. So after a 62 home run season, he had a down year. Now he has an up year, and he with just his violent swing, anything could happen. His oblique can get torn, and then and he's 32, so that's only going to be a growing problem as he gets older into his 30s, and that's why I don't think he'll ever hit the 100 WAR mark, because he won't be able to play full seasons, which he'll need to for the next 4 or 5 seasons. And I just have if I'm going to bet, I'm going to bet that he isn't going to do that. So it's great this year. If I had that Aaron Judge refractor card again, I would again sell it and make a profit.
What was the peak at on that? 5? 5.5?
It might have been, yeah. I sold it for 21. You know what I mean? When it was coming down. But I profited from it.
Yeah, you did well. You did well with it.
Doubled it. But now that it's at 25, if he has another down year, that's going to go down, right? And how many more years can he have this 50, 60 home run pace seasons, especially as he gets older? Whereas Juan Soto, he's got, a longer career ahead of him if he stays healthy. And the last thing is that it's numbered to 499. I think serial number is going to be something you need to keep in mind when you decide which cards to invest in for the future.
Right. No, good points. I'm glad I gave that disclaimer, because I knew that it might have been an Aaron Judge sweep, because I'm still going to go with Aaron Judge.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Here's why. So the way my collection is going, or at least where I see it going in the future, is super rare of the best players. Right. So Ohtani, if I get an Ohtani, I don't want a Topps high-tech auto Ohtani. Right. I want that Bowman Chrome color auto if I'm going to hold it.
Yeah.
If I'm going to play the flip game where maybe in the right time I can make a couple grand, this is where the Aaron Judge makes sense to me. And because they're both refractors, I don't see myself holding any of those cards.
Okay.
So that's kind of the context I have, is just based on my collecting patterns and what I want to now invest in moving forward. I want to get to that, but I don't want to pay the upfront cash $13K for a Ohtani auto. But if I could, make a flip on the Aaron Judge in the right time,
see. Right.
And then he's going to hit 62 this year and it goes to 5K, I'll take my chances with that, as opposed to the PSA 9 Soto, where that might be a long-term play for somebody. And maybe that card is that long-term play for someone. So it's all subjective at the end of the day, because, maybe they're doing the same thing and it's a long-term hold. This is a long-term hold. But for me, this would be a short-term flip regardless, both cards. right? So I'm gonna go Aaron Judge and try to make the profit just based on he's doing crazy stuff right now. It's incredible, and I think him going down as one of the Yankees top players, you know, because Aaron Judge is a lifer, and I don't see him moving anywhere, and he keeps on producing. If he hits 60 again this year, that's insane. He's doing stuff that like other people have never done on the New York Yankees, right? So for me, that's the short-term flip I'm looking at. So I'm going to go Aaron Judge.
Okay, yeah. No, I totally follow you. And that's a smart move for sure. All right, we'll finish off with my pick one. And this is for the rich people out there, because all these cards sold recently for about $68,000. Okay, so $68,000. The first card, Stephen Curry's Topps Chrome Refractor 2009, numbered to 500. We all know what it is. So for $68,000, PSA 10. Okay, and then on June earlier this month, the 2011-12 Fleer Retro of Michael Jordan. It's a buybacks 97-98 of the Planet Metal autograph card. Okay, that sold for $68,320, and it says it's a 1 of 1 because it's probably a buyback, right? And it was autographed. So you have his auto of his 97-98 Planet Metal card. Okay.
I gotta see this card. Sorry, I'm just searching.
Yeah, no, I can show it to you too on the screen.
Yeah, it was on Golden, right? Okay, I see it.
Okay, yeah.
That's 101. Yeah, it's pretty sick.
And then just to add to the mix, 1996 Flair Showcase Legacy Collection of Kobe Bryant, PSA 10. It says here it's numbered to 150, and that sold April of this year for $68,177. So they're all around $68,000.
So 68 grand. So it's the $68,000 special on this episode.
That's right. So which one are you going for? The Kobe, numbered to 150, PSA 10, right? 1996 Flair Showcase Legacy Collection card. The buyback Flair Retro MJ, and it's autographed, 1 of 1, and then the Steph Curry Topps Chrome Refractor, numbered to 500, of course.
Do you have a pop count on that Curry?
Yep, the pop count for the PSA 10 is 28.
And then pop count for the Kobe? Do you have, or I imagine it's pretty like if it's numbered to 150.
Yep, it is 8.
8.
PSA
Do you have a picture of the Kobe?
Yep.
Right. Oh, that's sweet too.
Yep.
Man, this is tough. And that's autoed, right? Or no?
No, not the Kobe.
No. Okay. So that I'm gonna eliminate the Kobe right now.
Okay.
Because I think Kobe autos are obviously sought after. So like that would have been the deal breaker for me. Mm-hmm. MJ, that Flair Metal Universe is interesting because you have the on-card auto numbered to 1 of 1, so super rare, but it is a buyback.
Right.
And that's what is a kick in the nuts.
But it's MJ.
It's MJ, but it's a buyback. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with the Steph Curry.
Okay.
I believe there's so much more liquidity in that and demand because he's a relevant player today. And I believe that just based on liquidity alone, I think that's the best bet is the Steph Curry refractor, PSA 10. And PSA 10 is a crazy grade in that specific card. Just to have that in even a BGS 8 or 8.5 is like a massive card.
Yeah.
So to have it in a PSA 10, I think that's one card I would definitely. $68,000. I think you're gonna keep it in your collection until it makes sense to sell it. So, yeah, I think I'm gonna go Steph Curry.
All right, Steph Curry. Okay. All right. So the reason why I brought this up, I'm eliminating Kobe as well. I just want to see if that was going to play a factor, but I guess not for either of us. But I don't know if it's because I'm watching King of Collectibles and MJ cards are just, pretty liquid too. Anything MJ, and even just like looking at past sales of high-end cards, like non-rookie MJ rare high-grade cards are going for crazy amounts. Like it is, it's bucking the trend in a lot of ways. And so I'm not confident about this pick one. Maybe I'm being persuaded because of what I'm witnessing right now, but I'm going to roll the dice with MJ. I know it's a buyback, but the on-card auto adds something to it in terms of value, obviously. And it being a 1 of 1. And I love that Steph Curry Topps Chrome card, like the refractor. That's a grail for me one day. But I don't know. I have to stop betting against MJ. I think the MJ cards are just ridiculous, and I feel like it's just gonna hold value over time. So that's why I'm going with the MJ. That's a hard one, but man,
that is. I wouldn't mind both of them. Let's put it that way.
Right. You can't lose. Yeah. All right. That's another episode of Cards to the Moon. Thank you guys for joining us once again, and we'll have another new episode for you on Tuesday. We'll see you then. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.